Okay, we're back to another week, to another weekend, and our conversation about the politics. And I'm sure some people who've been inboxing me have been telling me I need to say something about Rigathi's face-off with Raila in Nyandarua this weekend, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. But first, I want to share something that was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. It's called Michael Inaina. He's a professor. He sends me ideas on politics. So he asked me whether we realize exactly what happened last year. According to him, and he's correct to some extent, some of us spent so much time demonizing William Ruto that we might have missed a very, very important turnkey event in Kenya's politics. According to the professor, to the good professor, William Ruto's election is actually the essence of a revolution. And he makes his argument based on the fact that the people refused to follow the king and they chose their own person against the king's wishes. And that is what a revolution is. And when you go back in history and you analyze revolutions, that's actually what they look like. And the reality is that the people of Kenya actually refused to do what their kings were telling them. To a large extent, Kenya's politics is very, very hierarchical. We have regions that have bosses, and these bosses are the ones who tend to determine which direction that the region is going. And we have primary regions. We have Eastern, we have Mount Kenya, we have Nyanza, we have Rift Valley, and like that. And each of these regions has a very distinct leader per season. And since Kenya hasn't been around long enough, very few regions have actually transitioned their leadership. Rift Valley is the one that is very prominent, that has transitional leadership from Moi to Ruto. Nyanza is one of the regions that has never transitioned, has transitional leadership but within the same family, from Jaramogi to Raila. Mount Kenya right now is transitioning leadership from Uhuru Kenyatta, and there's an argument out there whether Rigathi is going to make it. But at this moment in time, he's the senior most political leader from the region in office. And according to the professor, what happened last year and what we seem to have missed is the revolution that happened in our politics. Today, we have people in office who people do not know. And it's true to a large extent. How would somebody like Moses Kuria ever have become a minister had there not been a revolution like the one that we had? How would there have been somebody like the lady who runs the health ministry, Aisha Jumwa? How would they ever have made it into the executive if there had not been a revolution? In fact, if you look at the executive today, you realize a lot of faces, a lot of people who would know in normal circumstances never have made it. Kipchumba Murkomen, CS for Transport, one of the most powerful ministries. How would they ever have gotten there had there not been a revolution? You go into parliament, you look at Kimani Ichung'wah, you look at Dede Nyoro, you look at Osoro, who is the majority whip, and then you ask yourself, how would these guys ever have gotten into leadership in parliament had there not been a revolution? So the argument for revolution is out there, and we're going to keep revisiting this discussion over and over again in coming weeks. But it's a very interesting observation. Did Kenya go through a revolution last year that we didn't see? To some extent, I'm agreeing with the professor because the things that are happening politically, the changes, the changes, the most obvious changes is seen and obvious faces in leadership. And I think anybody would agree that today, the government we have today is very different from what we had a year and a half ago. The faces are different. We don't have even now when appointments are being made, you cannot guess. You might guess the region they come from, but you cannot guess the person who will be made into a particular office, whether it is a parastatal, chairman of a board, whether it is a CS or a PS. You're hearing people being made into PSs and CSs who in normal circumstances you never have seen coming. That is what revolutions look like, and I think it is going to be important for us to understand this as having happened in this country last year, for us to be able to leverage it the most. When I listened to Rigathi in Nyandarua, one of the things that stood out in my head is how he said that from 1963, from the year 60 years ago, when this country got independence, there has been no one who associated himself with the Mau Mau, who has been anywhere near the top leadership of this country, except him. Now, people will argue about whether or not he's a son of Mau Mau, but I think we can comfortably say he's the first person to officially associate himself with the Mau Mau in public office. Tells you a lot about what we're saying about this revolution. What do we do about it? I think this, to a large extent, I mean, I have one of my children was pointing out and saying, it's actually possible to become anybody in this country if Ruto became president. It was a very interesting observation to come from a teenager. And she came from that point of, there was always the assumption that you need to be from a certain family to be someone. Those are the things, those are the myths that were broken, the structures that we talk about when we talk about the deep state. And by the way, the deep state actually exists. System actually exists. I saw it. How Ruto managed to dismantle it and debunk it and just literally destroy it last year, and destroy it from doing what Uhuru expected it to doing what was in Ruto's benefit, is something I guess somebody's going to write a book about. But that's Professor Michael Wainaina. I agree with him. We went through a revolution last year. Our politics changed. And for the next generation, our politics is going to be very different because William Ruto was elected. Had it been Raila Odinga who was elected, we would have the same faces. We'd have the same families in office. The fact that William Ruto got elected means we're going to see a lot of different people everywhere, not just in politics, but in business. You're hearing people being made into chairmans of parastatals or of blue chip companies you've never heard about. Why? Because it's a new elite that is reorganizing around William Ruto, and it is displacing the one that existed. So our politics, our economics, our social structure, leadership of churches, leadership of social groups is going to change a lot, because the people who had been assumed to be the people who occupy leadership have been removed and they've been replaced because of the revolution that happened last year, in last year's general election. I'm open for discussion on that one. I'm open for criticism, but just listening and thinking about that for a minute made me realize actually the professor has a point.